everyone, my name's Brett and I work as a spiritual release therapist, and I'm going to talk today, and I also do house clearings as well. So I'm going to talk today about ghosts in particular. We'll deal with, I think the first thing is to define what a ghost is, if we're going to talk about it for an hour or so. And a ghost is an apparition or a disembodied person, basically. I have come across the ghost of a dog in a house once before, but that's pretty unusual. Mostly it is a person that's disembodied. There are various things that are confused with ghosts sometimes. Elementals, which like people see sometimes, they're not ghosts, because a ghost is a person that hasn't transitioned properly to the other side or to the light after their death. An elemental is always an elemental. So they haven't been a person and become an elemental, so they're not included. The other thing is that people are often very frightened of ghosts because they think, and this is pretty common, they think that somehow they're dangerous or they could hurt them. Well, those fears are not well based, because ghosts don't hurt people. Mostly they're frightened themselves. Dark entities hurt people, but dark entities don't live in houses. Dark entities attach and enter into people, and they do their work through people, not by entering into houses. So these films you see about ghosts and things, most of it's nonsense about hurting people in houses. You can get poltergeists, but a poltergeist is not a ghost. It's an expression of the energy of a person living in the house, usually. It's not an energy that's come into the house. I had a case once where a man wanted me to do a ghost clearing, or a house clearing. He was convinced there was something in the house by virtue of the fact that he heard a noise one night, woke up, went out into the hallway, and he saw little boys or little persons, wet footprints going up the hallway. And then they stopped, and then he found a bottle of water, part of it missing, partly empty, sorry, on the ground, and he went and checked his son, and his son was asleep in bed, and he was convinced it was a spook in the house. So I did a clearing. What I came up with was there was a spook in the house, but it was one generated by the child. It wasn't a ghost, and it was very clear to me that those steps had been made by his son. His son hadn't necessarily got out of bed to do it. It's quite possible that the energy, the son was so wound up, and that the whole tension in the house was really extreme. The mother was hysterical, and I could call her an hysteric in Freudian terms. The father wasn't far behind, and they were Catholics, they were short, they were being targeted by Satan, and the energy was so great in the house that these things became possible. It's a bit like poltergeists. So, another thing is, if your Uncle Ben that's long deceased comes and sits on the end of your bed at midnight and has a chat to you to try and help you through a critical period in your life, that's not a ghost. That's just a visitor from a concerned family member. Quite a different thing. So ghosts usually are found in residences because they're attached to a certain place. If a ghost attaches to a person and enters into a person, they're no longer a ghost, they're an earthbound entity within a person, affecting that person greatly or not much at all, depending on what sort of an entity they are. If they're a little child that's attached to, say, a nurse, when the child died in hospital, the nurse may not even know the child is there. If it's an ex-husband that's a bully and domineering and he's attached to his wife, he's going to make life hard for her. All right, so ghosts are nearly always human beings that have got, when the transition process has gone wrong. So that transition process, briefly, I'll explain that a little bit and make the whole thing a bit more clear. When people die, they leave their physical body, and when they've left that body, they don't just go zoom straight to what we would call the light. There are a number of different levels of states of mind. The various levels in if you want to call it heaven, as Christians do, or in the light, or in the next world, are really states of consciousness. They're not actual places, right? So, but you experience them as places. When people die, they go into the astral zone because their astral body and etheric bodies aren't always dissolved. And depending on their state of mind, they may stay there for quite some time. Some of them can stay there for hundreds of years, others will stay there for a very, very brief time, and they're clear enough to then move straight up. All right. For instance, I had a client that had been molested by a man, and this man was still in contact with her even though he was deceased. I made contact with this man and offered to, I think he was an EVE, I think. Anyway, I offered to take him out of the dark zone and clean him up and basically an on-site rehabilitation process and send him to the light, which can be done. And he said no. He was feeling so guilty about what he'd done, he wanted to go into a dark place and stay there to resolve his guilt. And they would let him, that's fine, he will go there. And he went there, and we had no more trouble with him. But he could stay there for I don't know how long. But once he becomes amenable to a change of heart, a light worker will come and say, we've been waiting for you, come on, let's go, we're going to take you to a better place. So, what attracts so that's one thing that can stop a person from making that transition, and that is fear of guilt or fear of punishment. And that can be really strong in some people, and it's part of the reason some people live so long, past their useful use by date, actually, because they're just terrified of dying. So they hang on, and it's all pointless. One, you're going to die anyway, and two, no one gets punished. It's just the only people punish you are yourself. So people will, but people will remain behind not only out of fear, they'll sometimes remain behind because they're really attached to other people that live in the house. They may be in love with someone there, or there may be someone else in the house that has died and become a ghost, and they want to stay with them and keep the family together, and they will stay there. I've experienced that, and I'll tell you about that experience in a few moments. A lot of people, I should say a lot, quite a few people that end up as ghosts die in a state of confusion, and that's the problem for them. They don't even realise they're dead, some of them, for quite a long time, and they don't want to believe they're dead. And some of them are so confused, they really can't even think through, am I dead, am I not, should I be here, can I go somewhere else? They can't even do that. And if they're a lower level understanding and they're basically fairly ignorant, they haven't got even the beginning skills to do that. And there are people like that. And the experiences in this lifetime can dull their intellect to the point where they really can't think anymore for themselves. I've worked in houses where I've found people, a couple of times I've found men or a man in a bedroom that overdosed in that bedroom and is still stuck there. And in each case, they weren't really sure, they'd been there for some time as a ghost, but they weren't sure if they were dead, they weren't sure if they weren't sure of anything, and they couldn't think anything through. It was like they were still in that confused drug state. All I can imagine is, I don't know if this is the case, but I can imagine that if they're in a hugely altered state of consciousness at the point of death, and they're already in various, they're not earthbound anymore, they're off in other realms, and then they die, they won't know whether they come back and die or whether they're still in other realms, probably. So, and the thing about this is, once someone dies and doesn't have a body anymore, there's no time for them. So that's another, it makes it difficult for them to judge as well. Sometimes you can get a ghost that's quite playful. I remember once I went to a psychic development group, and they were doing table rapping or something, and this character turned up and started answering questions, and I knew he was real because I could see him in my mind's eye. Just the same way as I work with house clearings myself, and I could see this man, and he was a portly fella, and he was having a great time with us in the group, and we're just loving it. And someone said, facilitator, you know, we've got this guy here. She said, oh yeah, he always turns up. So he was the ghost who was just having a good time and didn't want to go anywhere else. You know, he wasn't interested in spiritual advancement or meeting an angel or God or anything. He just wanted to have a good time. What else have we got? Oh yeah, also you've got the person too that dies and they've owned a house. It may have been in the family for centuries, it may not have been, but they love that house and they don't want to leave it. And they're the ones that will make loud noises at night to try and scare the people that have moved in because they're angry about someone they don't know is in their house. And that happens. And you can see from that how ignorant a person is about where they are, the nature of the world, the nature of our human potential as multi-dimensional spiritual beings, which is what we really are. We all suffer from ignorance to some degree, other times, otherwise we wouldn't be in physical bodies. But you know, they take it to the nth degree there. And sometimes people will become earthbound when they have experienced a sudden shock death that they had no advance warning of. They will often in that case be for a little while earthbound and become an earthbound entity. They may roam around a bit and then finally move on, or they may get stuck somewhere in a place or with someone that's friendly and not enter into that person but stay in that place. I'll give you some examples of those things now. One delightful example I had was at the last Ghostbusters Conference that Joyce organised. What was that? That Abbey, what's it called out there?
Abbotsford.
Abbotsford, yeah. And I went up, I was sitting up near the front when one of the participants was speaking, and I noticed on the left there was 4 or 5, I think it was 5 young girls, ranging in height from about this down to about this, and they looked like young teenage girls, and I thought, oh, look at that. Then I thought to myself, what's this about? So I said to them, why are you girls here? And they looked at me and they talked to me, and they said, we're here to learn. And they were standing like this, they were really attentive to the speaker. And I thought, wow, she's got them. But I said, oh, okay. And I thought about it some more, and I thought, obviously they're associated with this place. So then I said to them, why are you here, and why haven't you gone on to the next realm, to the light, to learn more? And they looked at me, and I said, then you could work for Jesus in a bigger way because you would know more. And they looked at me, and they immediately went into a huddle and started talking amongst themselves. And then one of them came out and said to me, are you a Catholic? I said, no. I knew this was a critical question, so I said, I answered it truthfully. I said, but I'm a follower of the teachings of Jesus Christ. I always have been. I said, oh, looks very doubtful. I said, do you want a sign to see to show that that's true or that I'm all right? And I said, yes. So I sat there and I said, it's up to you, mate. Anyway, a light came down around me. And then one of them came over and said, which really surprised me, and then one of them came over and said, what would it be like to go to the light? And I said, well, what if I get the angel of light to come down and come near you, and you people can feel what it's like? And they said, they went back in a huddle, talked about it for a bit, and said, and the tall one came out and said, yeah, all right, we'll try that. I said, okay, so angel of light came down, and I know that whenever the angel of light comes down and extends its energy, the people always swoon and just go, you know. So they said, yes, all right. So as this angel came down, it came down in a very Catholic fashion actually. It came down and just created these huge, great wings, which for the purpose, it doesn't always have wings, and created these huge, great wings, and then just gathered all of them up in these wings like this, which I thought was really lovely because they were obviously probably orphans or something, and I found out that they all died in the 1980 flu epidemic in that place. That's why they were all there as a small group. And they were gone. That was it. And I thought, well, I took her audience away. I'm sorry about that, but she didn't even know they were there probably, so it was okay. But that's a good example of people that were there, and they were well-meaning. They were there because they'd come and joined the monastery, presumably, whatever, even if they'd come as orphans. They were dedicated by that. They'd been taught to pay attention, like over in the classroom as far as they were concerned. But they had no knowledge of the spirit world or what happens after death. And so they were just still doing what they were doing, well, 1918, that's over 100 years ago now, isn't it? They're still doing the same thing, but they've stopped and they've moved on. Now they can grow. So that's ghosts in a nutshell, really. Now you can get false sightings of ghosts too. Sometimes you can see what you think is a ghost, and this is a bit unusual, but it may well be that you are actually seeing into another dimension which is coexistent with this dimension. And you can see people walking around, they're not a ghost in this dimension. You're getting a glimpse of another dimension where people are doing activities that are totally unrelated to what you're doing and what we're doing here. That's possible too. But that's usually not a scary thing. They use that sort of thing. They don't take any notice of us. That's my experience anyway. But these things are all open to. I'm not saying anything's categorically true here because things develop as you go, but that's what I've experienced with that. So most ghosts, to sum up on that, most ghosts are fairly ignorant about their situation and about the bigger picture in which they're a part. And most of them are quite harmless. So if you hear someone tramping down your hallway in the middle of the night, you could just stick your head out the door and say, look, keep it down will you please, I'm trying to get some sleep. Or you could say to them, look, you know, I could arrange for you to go on to the next level, which is a lot of fun and you'll meet a lot of nice people. Would you be interested in that? And they may say yes. They should. If you keep saying it, they probably eventually wouldn't say yes. Unless they're really grumpy old buggers, you know. I'm not going to go into it. So in a minute we're going to talk about how not to become a ghost yourself. You've probably already got some ideas on that. Any questions on it so far?
How do we not become a ghost?
But before you move on, you said that there's no such thing as an evil ghost spirit.
Well, let me say I've never come across one, and I'm not saying they're not evil in their mind, but they have no power to really hurt you.
Okay.
Yeah, they might be, if they think that you've moved into their house, they will rattle the pots and pans to drive you out at night, but it doesn't mean that they can actually do any harm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because banging on the walls and horrible smells in a house, I've experienced that.
Oh yeah. And those smells and bad smells all usually seem to come from very low level intelligence. You know, people associated with that. It's like going to the slums, you know. And on the opposite too, beautiful smells tend to be associated with more highly developed entities or people.
I've started smelling nice smells just randomly.
Yep.
In the house where I am now.
Yep.
But when I was in the house where I grew up, it was horrible smells drifting in and out, sort of thing. Yeah.
And this can often reflect your own development too.
Okay.
Yeah. Because if you're around here, you won't smell the smells that people up here are generating. Okay, as you come up to that's a simple way of looking at it. Yeah, sure. But you know, if granddad's a ghost in the house and he used to sit and smoke a pipe, you'll smell the pipe smoke in the house. And you know, and another thing too is with house clearings, sometimes I will find a part of the house that's got a very dense, dark energy in it, but nobody feels comfortable entering into that energy or going in that room, for instance. It's not necessarily a ghost. It's usually just a dark energy that's been created by activities or people in the house at some point, and it's like lodged there. It's like mould, and you can take that out. But some houses and some buildings are built in such a way that they tend to capture dark energy in certain points, and you have to keep the windows open and things like that, to keep them clear. A lot of older houses used to be like that in the old days when they had narrow little windows and big dark rooms and things. They would sometimes capture negative energy, just the way it was. And it also depends too on if you built the house. This is a bit of a digression, but doing house clearing, sometimes people build their house on energies that are already there, and they inhabit the house. They permeate the house, let's put it that way. And they're not people, they're just energies. Like I had a woman rang me, she was a Dompa, and she and her husband were building a house, and they built a number of houses. They used to buy a land, build a house, live in it for a year or two, sell it for a huge profit, and move on and do it again. And she said they'd done this a number of times and never had any trouble with subcontractors and so on and so forth. They knew how to do the whole business, but she said with this one, everything had gone wrong. Every subcontractor had been in trouble. She was sort of ringing me to see if there's a last resort to see if there was something terrible going on there. And her son wasn't sleeping well either. So I took a look. I think there was something to do with the son, but I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But what I found was there was a dark energy on the site before the house was built, and it didn't cover just their side; it covered around their block, and it had been put there possibly, I would say, at least thousands of years ago by a tribe that lived there. And I'm assuming they would be Aborigines, but not necessarily, because there have been other tribal people lived in this country. I've never read about it, but I've come across artefacts doing this work that prove to me that that's the case. And they had created this energy as a defence against attack by other tribes, so that it was a very negative energy designed to push people away. And I would say when they used it, it probably was more than just the energy it was expressing at this moment. It probably had the ability to possibly incapacitate people or confuse them. And I've come across this before in Europe. Back in ancient times, warrior kings would have sorcerers working for them, and they would put spells and send curses of negative energy or entities that they would create to the opposition to confuse them and weaken them and make them less effective as warriors and leaders. And this is what this tribe was doing. So that wasn't a ghost, but worked that way. The other thing to come across too is children will sometimes create a monster in their mind of their own, which will take on an apparently independent existence. It's not truly independent because they're depending on the energy of the child to keep themselves alive. But the kids can develop that. Like I had one where, I think I talked about this last time, but it's a classic. I've had another one, but it wasn't quite as good as this. But the mother in Queensland put a kid in, he's about 8, I think, and he had 2 men following him around. One had a black hockey mask, you know those black plastic masks that ice hockey players wear? Yeah, one of them on. And the other one had a knife, and they were following him around all over the place. And he was terrified. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't pay attention at school, he was just scared all the time. So I said to the mother, I said, get him to draw me a picture of them both and send it to me. And he sent me these 2 pictures, and I realised straight off he created these. So I then meditated on them, and I tuned into them, and I met these 2 guys, and they talked to me. They were that well developed. They talked to me, and I said, look guys, you're scaring the hell out of this kid. And I said, oh, no, he's our friend, you know, we love him. That's why we're with him all the time. We think he's great. And he made us, you know. And I said, yeah, I know, but it's not working because he's not paying attention to school. He's terrified, and you've got to go, fellas. No, we really like him, you know. I said, no, sorry, you've got to go. But each of them had this sort of umbilical cord thing that went to the boy. And he didn't realise he'd seen these things at some point, and the more he thought about them, the more his subconscious mind built them up into monsters that without his conscious mind even knowing that was going on. So I cut the umbilical cords and they immediately started to wither up and die. It was really horrible. But they died, and I then extracted the connections from the boy and a bit of other work, and he was fine. His mother said to me about a week later, she said, they were out walking, and he said to her, gee, Mum, it's really good not to have those guys following me around anymore. I don't think about them anymore now. So he was happy.
So he could see them?
I could see them, yeah.
So he could see them?
He could see them, yeah. And wizards and witches do that sort of stuff. They could create someone and create an entity and send it out to give somebody a hard time, attack people, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that's, thankfully we don't do that much anymore here, but in some countries in Asia and Africa and stuff, they're still doing this stuff. Okay, some entertaining examples maybe. Oh yeah, the classic. This is the one that, the example that, this is going back quite some years now. Before my father died, which was back in about 87 or something. But it was really what got me believing in ghosts, reality. Up until then, it was I've got a could be true, but I'm not quite 100% sure yet, basket that I put things in, like I was talking about today here. I don't disbelieve it, but I'm waiting for more evidence, and I've got stuff over here, absolutely, you're spot on, and this stuff here, so, well, I'm still working on this, but this one convinced me about ghosts. My father was in hospital and he was dying, and I went in to see him and stood at the end of his bed. There was some silences because we had a difficult relationship. So, anyway, I'm standing at the end of his bed. He's in a room of his own, and he's lonely and he's unhappy, and I can hear this shh sound, and shh. I thought, what's that? And in the corner of the room, there was a little squared off bit, and it was a toilet and a sink in there. And I said, does that noise, can you hear that noise? He said, yeah, it's very annoying. If you could do something about it, that'd be good. So I said, I'll have a look. It's probably just the system in the toilet, you know. And I said, I could tell the hospital staff, it would probably take a month to think about doing something. I said, I'll just fiddle it for you. He said, oh, that'd be good. So I went in there, and it was a windowless room about 1.5 meters square. It was very small. And as I began to shut the door, I hadn't turned the light on. It became almost pitch black. And before it almost got pitch black, I saw this white thing move from that corner where there was a sink to this corner where there was a toilet. So I shut the door, pitch black, didn't turn the light on, and I thought, I know what's going on here. I haven't experienced this before, but I've read about this, and I'm sure I'm right. Anyway, so I just stood there and entered into a meditative state. And this woman, and what had happened was, I knew straight off, someone had died in the toilet, which is not uncommon. And it was a little old lady, and she had a white hospital gown, and she was just moving automatically from one corner of the room to the other, and she couldn't stop. She was in this sort of ritualistic pattern. She probably wasn't aware that she was doing it over and over and over. She just, that's what she was doing. So I just stood there like this, and then she became aware of me when I went into that meditative state, and she jumped on me and wrapped her arms around me and her legs around my waist, like a child would. I'm standing there, and I'm putting my hands under here. I automatically did that, and I could actually feel her hanging off me, and I could feel her fear. She was absolutely terrified, and I thought, golly, I've got to do something here. So I just stilled myself and then took myself up, and she and I went up and kept going up for a long time. I kept thinking, I'm seeing darkness and I can see lights here and there. You know, it's just taken a long time. What's going on? Anyway, finally, way up here on the left, I see a light that's brighter than others, and it's starting to get bigger. And I said to her, "That's where you have to go." There's no way she was going to let go of me. She was hanging on for grim death. And I said, all right. I said, "So can you see that light?" But she wasn't looking. She was hanging on like this. So I said, "There's where you got to go." So I put my hands under her bum, pointed in the right direction, and I went and gave her a big shove, and she was gone. And I thought, all right, I've learned to do it much more adroitly since then. I don't shove them in the direction of the light anymore. But anyway, then I find myself back in this little room in the dark. So I opened the door, I never did turn the light on, and I thought, looked at the toilet, and walked out. My father said, "Did you fix it?" And I said, "I think so, see how it goes." So about a week later, I was back there visiting him again, and we're having a chat, same old thing, a lot of silences. And I said, "Oh, by the way," I said, "did that noise stop in the toilet?" He said, "Yeah, thanks very much for fixing that." And a nurse came in at that point and heard that bit of conversation, and she said, "Oh, did you fix that? Thank you, it was really annoying." So I believe in ghosts. Not only that, but not only did I see and hear, I didn't hear her, she didn't make any sounds verbally, but I actually could feel her hang on to her, you know, which I thought, I didn't realise how unusual that was at that time, actually. Yeah, okay. But she was someone that was, look, obviously did no idea what was going on, and she had died, even though she was in hospital, she had died obviously not expecting to die, had no idea where she was even anymore, and she was just caught in a ritualistic behaviour. It's quite possible that her soul or spirit had actually gone. I don't know. I don't know enough about that. But for someone to be just doing that ritualistic behaviour, which ghosts often do, means there's a very low level of intelligence operating there, as far as I can tell. Okay, so, and this is not uncommon. I'll walk down the same hallway every night at the same time. Another one, I was in Walkerton one day with a friend, and we were having coffee on the veranda of a house that had been turned into a restaurant and cafe place. I think it was the Honey Bee or something it was called. And we're sitting out there, and the veranda, as I look down the veranda at the next table, and I can see this woman dressed in clothes that probably came out about the 1820s, and she's sitting very upright. She's got this jacket on with a bit of a flare, and she's got a skirt well down her legs, and dark colours, and she's drinking a coffee. And I thought, it's a ghost. And I said to my friend, I said, "Can you see that?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, I can." So on the way out, I said to the people there, "Do you have a resident ghost in this place?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you hear her in the kitchen at night time. No worries, she's there." And I said, "No, I just saw her." I said, "Yeah, some people do." But what I picked up with from her when I saw her immediately was that she had lived and run a business there, and the business had been her life, and she'd never married because she was terrified of childbirth. And I thought, that's fair enough, because in those days the death rate from childbirth was very high amongst women, you know, because the doctors weren't particularly keen on washing their hands. I don't think some of them even knew how to wash their hands. And, you know, I mean, the first doctor that started washing his hands was ridiculed by the medical profession for many years before they woke up to the fact that they were killing their patients. And the women were terrified to go to hospital because the chances of dying there were much higher than from a home birth because of all the lack of hygiene. Anyway, so she was, that was fear. And also attachment to her business. That was the business still, and she still sit out there and have a coffee, and she's still going there and work in the kitchen at night time. Yeah. And another one was the hospital cafe. One more I'll tell you about. This is an interesting one in two respects. One, I went to on a ghost tour, Williamstown, and it was ghastly actually. It was a cold winter's night, it was raining and it was freezing cold. And we went to these dreary, horrible places. And one place we went to was an upstairs big barn-like room, and it had been an opium den many years ago. And there was a ghost in the corner. And it was the only one I saw actually. But I approached it and it was terrified. It said, go away, go away, go away. And I thought, oh, this poor thing, as people come and look at it all the time. And I said, can I help you? And someone, go away, go away. And it was too frightened to be even helped in any way whatsoever. And I think it's not, in a way that's not uncommon for ghosts, because they're often, as I said, fearful, and they're often they're not capable of reasoning very well, and they've got to be approached in a different way, not just by tourists coming past. The other thing was, the next day when I went home after that, I woke up the next morning and I was sure that I was coming down with the flu, because I just felt really awful. I had this terrible sensation in my gut, and I had no energy at all, and I thought, oh damn, I probably picked that up from someone there last night. And by lunchtime I wasn't feeling any better, but I hadn't developed any bone pain, I hadn't developed any respiratory symptoms, so I thought, this isn't an illness like flu, so there's something going on here. And I thought, I think I need to meditate on this. So I went up the lounge, I sat down, moved into a meditative state, and immediately I saw this giant spider. And I knew I'd picked it up on that tour the night before. And then I didn't will, it was interesting, I didn't even will this. I suddenly saw myself standing there, and I had a spear in my hand, and the spear was, it wasn't really a spear, it was a long, thin, like stainless steel rod with no barb on the end. And I just speared the spider right through the middle and pinned it to the floor, and then it just went, shrank down, and nothing disappeared. And I sat up, opened my eyes, and I felt perfectly fine immediately. And I thought that spider represented an energy, or it was the energy I picked up at that ghost tour last night. Don't think I'll go to Williamstown again in a hurry. But I don't think it's indicative of the whole place. So anyway, how not to become a ghost? You nearly missed it, Joyce. Look, the main way to not become is to develop a sense of awareness about what you're doing, who you are, and I'm sure everyone here's got that, so it's probably not going to happen to you. There are some things you can do to enhance your transition when you do die, though, because most people don't know anything about that and just leave it to chance what's going to happen to them, and hope that it's going to be all right. One thing is to learn to meditate and to learn to experience yourself through meditation, not as a body. Experience yourself, even though you're in the body, to experience yourself without the body in meditation. Another way is dying is a little bit like going to sleep in a way. And sometimes if you're really tired, you put your head down and bang, next thing you wake up and it's morning, or 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. But if you go to sleep, lie down to go to sleep when you're not really exhausted, you can become aware of your body going to sleep. You don't have to go to sleep mentally at the same time as your body does, and it's a really good exercise to do that. To watch your breathing, slow it down, and which will automatically if you keep warm and you're in your bed. And as you do that, just pay attention to what's going on in your body and stay alert to what's going on in your body. And you can actually, if you want, pay attention to your feet and watch bits relax as you lay there. But you'll find that as you start to move in, your body starts to move into that sleep state. It's sort of almost like a draining of energy flowing out from your body. And if you can stay alert at that point, and it takes some practice, because most times you'll be gone at that point. But if you practice it for a while, you can go past that point and you'll feel the body just go to sleep, and it'll be like a lump of meat, and it'll be like you can feel trapped in a wooden doll's body or something like that. That's what it feels like. Once you experience the body in that state, you become aware of what a limited, awkward vehicle it really is. It's amazing. And from that point, you can actually start to go places and do things. So if you've done that a little bit, or you've practiced that somewhat, when you actually die, you're going to be much more comfortable about being without the body, and you can roam around and have a look around and see what's happening. And watch out for any. Well, if you're doing that, probably no dark entities are going to come past and try and attach to you anyway, or take you for, because that can happen. It can happen. I remember I talked with a woman once, and I said to her, I was doing we were doing a past life regression, and she told me this terrible story about this horrible life she had, which sort of mirrored, it was 100 times worse than the life she was having in the present, but it mirrored the life she was having in the present. And she was only about 27, but I took her through to the death in that past life, and then I said, okay, now, until she was seeing her body, and I said, what happened next? She said, oh, nothing. I said, what can you see? She said, oh, it's dark. I said, yeah, keep going. And I said, can you see any colours? She said, yeah, I can see black and red. I said, black that's more black than the darkness? She said, yeah. I said, okay. And I knew then immediately that the past life she related wasn't hers. It was the past life of an entity that's in her right now. And the reason she's come to me is because that entity is progressively overcoming her personality and recreating that past life. And so what we did was I brought her back into the present under in trance state, and then talked to that entity in her and took it out. And she just felt so good she couldn't believe it. She just wrote me a magnificent testimony. But so if when you're dying you're aware of what's going on, by coming and listening to people give talks like this and practicing some of these skills, you prepare yourself for death in a way that most people aren't. And it's not just a haphazard event. And really, it should be really a joyful event. We usually celebrate birth of children, of babies, and mourn the dead. We should celebrate both, because when you die, unless you've been unmitigatedly evil or whatever, but even then, eventually you're going to go to a much better place. You're going to meet wonderful people, and you're going to meet people that you really love that have already passed on, and you're going to meet highly developed people that are going to teach you more, and you're just going to learn and learn and learn until you're ready to come back, if you need to. Most of us will. But so it really should be a time of, and it's a release from the aches and pains of age and the worries you've had. So it should be a time of you should be. I know we miss some people because we like their company. Not all of them, but even when they, we should, on the other hand, be happy for them that they've moved on to the next stage. It's like being graduated to the next class.
Yeah, a lot of people with near-death experiences say that it's just so wonderful, the feeling that they don't want to come back, but they're told to come back.
They're told to come back. Yeah, that's what you can experience. Yeah, and they're people that that haven't had to wrestle with the darkness. Like I remember, they're basically good people, I suppose. Yeah, and I remember one day I tuned in to see what Hitler was up to. And I found myself in what I call the grey zone, and everything was grey, no colours, just shades of grey, and there was a small room, grey, and a table and a chair, and he was seated there in a chair writing furiously, and he was writing another book, and he said to me, "This time I'm going to get it right." So he was planning another takeover, and I thought, you're going to be there for ages, mate. You're going to be there for ages. But yeah, they don't want to come back. It's fantastic. But they probably, most of them will come back because they've got to then take what they've learned and express. They've got to. Our goal is to express that unconditional love in this lifetime in physical bodies. Then we don't have to come back. So long as the temptation, of course, once we're in the body, is to feel we've got to compete with other people, and we've got to look after ourselves and our family, and it doesn't matter what happens to other people, and so on and so forth. The body's the problem. But,
so was he in a Higher state?
Sorry?
Was Keith Layton in a higher state? Or?
A higher state?
A higher state than he was when
No,
he
no.
wasn't. He was in the same state.
He was much the same, yeah.
Okay.
Tough case, I'd say, a tough case. The other one that I mentioned on that radio interview was the plane that went down in the Indian Ocean, and I've never found it yet. Well, there was a lot of speculation about what had caused it to disappear. I was meditating in a group sometime after, possibly a year after, I think, and all of a sudden I found myself underwater. And I thought, wow, what's going on here? And I'm cruising along underwater, and then I see this an aeroplane with a hole in the fuselage. And I thought, I know what this is. And I went in through the hole, and there was one Asian woman there, and she was screaming, and she was saying, why didn't they do something? They knew for hours something was wrong. Why didn't they do something? I want to go home. And she was screaming at me, and I thought, wow, what am I going to do? And she'd been screaming for the whole year, of course, but for her, there was no time. So I thought, what am I going to do? And asking the question, my whole self gave me the answer, and immediately I see in the middle distance a man, a woman, and a child. And I said to this woman, I said, there's your forebears, there's your family, because those Asians, they worship what they call them, forebears and things, don't they? What's the word? I forget. Ancestors, yeah, worship their ancestors. And I said, there they are. And she was gone. And I'm in the plane, and the fuselage was empty, so she must have been the last one. And that's probably why I was told to take the job. But the captain of the plane was still in the cockpit, and he was alone. They had a co-pilot, but he wasn't there. And the captain was in there, but he was mad. He was totally insane and lost his senses, and he was raving. And I was told, can't do anything for him at the moment, and leave him. So I left him there. I went back quite a while later, and he was gone. So but he wasn't in a state to be dealt with at that time. And I realised that he orchestrated the whole thing. He brought the plane down. And quite some years later, I read an article, it was from a Dutch newspaper or something, because the Dutch were involved in the investigation, I believe, and they'd come to the conclusion that it was the pilot who organised the whole thing. The pilot wasn't error, it was intentionally done. And they listed about 6 other cases of the same thing happening. And some of them I had read about. There was that one in Europe where the guy placed a crane into the mountain. He locked the pilot out and then crashed the plane in the mountain and killed a couple hundred people or something in the end. It's happened a few times, apparently. Yeah. So if your pilot looks depressed, take another plane, I suppose.
But there was a hole in the side of the plane, so it sounded like a missile hit it, but it wasn't. It was him intentionally doing something.
No, that's not what I got. Could have actually developed a hole from
crashing.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. Right, now what I'll suggest is we can investigate these noises now. Would you like to do that?
Let's do that.
Okay. Oh, you want me to stand out there?
Beside my bed